Hello everyone. I'm happy to introduce to you MIDeL, which is a free web-based educational resource for medical imaging and deep learning. My name is Brad Erickson. I'm the director of the Mayo AI Lab, and we're located at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. I'm doing this because I feel very strongly that deep learning is the future of medical imaging, and it's critical that a number of people, both within and outside of the medical imaging field, become familiar with this technology. Those inside the field both need to understand what it can do and what it can't do, and potentially may become involved with its further development. But also I'd love to see a number of people from outside the traditional medical imaging field become a part of this field. Deep learning has captured the imagination of many people over the past few years. We understand a little bit about how the human brain can perceive a cat and ultimately determine that in fact the thing we are looking at is a cat. Based on some rough models, we do the same thing with the computer, where we have a number of images and we feed it into a similar structure to what we think the brain operates, called a neural network, and from that we then ultimately can make decisions about what is in those images. In the case of medicine, we might be more interested in deciding if there, for instance, was an infection or a hemorrhage or a tumor within these images. I think that increasingly knowledge of deep learning is simply not optional for those of us who are practicing medicine, and that's going to become ever increasingly true. Now, there are lots of different ways to learn about deep learning. The traditional way is to read books, and there are some great books out there. I've enjoyed reading a number of these. There are also fantastic resources out on places like YouTube, where there are fantastic videos that can explain some of the concepts. There are also journals. One of these, for instance, is called Radiology Artificial Intelligence, and I've written a few of the articles that are in there. And I think, again, there's great content there. And there's also content out on GitHub, although it's not organized in a traditional educational fashion. So there's a lot of content out there, but how do you weave it all together into a form that you can consume? And we felt like there was a deficit there, and that's what led us to create what we call the MIDeL book. This is modeled on Jeremy Howard's deep learning book, which is a series of Jupyter notebooks. If you program in Python, you probably have heard of Jupyter if you aren't using it already. Jupyter notebooks are a way that you can run code like Python within a web environment, and it is actually executed in cloud-based computers. There's one form of it called Colab, or Google Colab, and we are compatible with that. And so if you are able to access Google Colab, it actually can provide you access to GPUs, which are really essential to have reasonable compute times for some of these deep learning techniques. And so as a result, then, it means you don't have to buy an expensive computer with a GPU and set it all up. So while we have blocks of code, we also intersperse educational narrative, something like what would be in a traditional book, and that is in markup between the cells. Our focus is on medical imaging deep learning. We use PyTorch and Monai as the primary tools or frameworks around which we will provide this education. We do also provide some content on medical imaging, DICOM, and image processing, because if you don't understand where the images come from and some of their properties, it's easy to make errors when applying deep learning. This is self-contained, which means that all the data, code, and markup is hosted from our GitHub site all in one place, so you don't have to go out and try to find data sets by yourself. And the website hosting from these will also have a forum, and it will also have some videos, depending on which form you find most valuable for consuming this content. There is free access, but we do want you to register, mainly because with the forum, I don't want to have flame wars out there. I want to have genuine interactions between people. And I would note that this is supported by the Mayo Clinic and the Dalio Foundation. So if you are interested, the website is noted up here, https or http //midel.org. And that's not case sensitive, but we make it case relevant just so that you can recognize it stands for Medical Image Deep Learning. And if you enter that into your browser, you'll see something very similar to this on your browser, and you'll see the various components of content. I would encourage you then to look at some of the elements here up in the upper right corner. You can see, for instance, we'll start with chapters. So we've divided the whole field of medical image deep learning into several different pieces, including theoretical components, some of the basics and background, as well as the more traditional algorithmic components of deep learning. And as you click on these, you'll see that there are then chapters, which actually more correctly would be called Colab notebooks for each of these, and you'll see over time that there will be more and more elements. So if you, for instance, clicked on training strategy and then you clicked on this link here, it would actually launch a Google Colab notebook for you with all the code and training materials, and it should look something like this. And you can again see up here in the upper left-hand corner, you can click on a link to open it in Colab, and that would actually then open the instance with Google Colab providing GPU backend. In case you're not familiar with what I meant by markup, this ability to have things like bold text and less emphasized text and even graphical elements like pictures is what we mean by markup. And so this would be the markup or more traditional book type content. And then where you see this light gray, that is the actual code, the Python code that we will be executing. Some of the other areas of the website, you can see GitHub. So that's again where we actually host this code. We also have some components that are libraries for deep learning that we have built. There is also a component around the RIL, which is our informatics lab, that tells you a little bit about what's going on in our lab. Finally, we have podcasts, which is a catch-all term for audio as well as video components that we develop. And that may be where you found this link. Community is where we have the forum. Let me move my picture out of the way. And so this is where you have the ability to maybe post questions or try to answer other people's questions. Say, hey, I thought this about, this particular content. And we recognize that content gets out of date. There can be different situations where a certain technique may be more or less appropriate. So while we try to do our best to educate, we recognize that what we say may not fit every circumstance. If you click on the GitHub link, this is where you'll be led to. Again, you can see there are things like discussions, but there are also components where the website and the code itself can be accessed. So again, I want to have this admission that we recognize there are challenges here. Not everything fits neatly into the buckets that we defined at this point. There are things like imaging and physics and properties of images that's not typical for deep learning, but it's important for medical imaging, and so we thought that that needed to be addressed. Some topics are a lot more complex than others, and so there's a lot of variability in chapter length. In general, we're guessing that there would be something like 8 to 10 pages of content, but some are shorter and some are definitely longer. There are many topics associated with the basic level, and those are all present at this point. Over time, we are going to keep adding more and more middle and advanced level topic as we build that out. So I want you to explore this website. Tell us what works well, what doesn't work as well, and if you can add in something about what you think we should do about it, that would be great. Tell us what things you think are missing, and tell us who you are and how you're using the website, because again, that both helps us get funding for further development in the future and can help us do a better job of answering the problems that you have. So I want to say thank you, and I hope that you enjoy the website itself.